The original building, it was built originally starting in 1732 as the State House for the colony of Pennsylvania. So all three branches of colonial government were located there, and it was viewed as a very elegant, grand building at the time, and it reflected Pennsylvania's position as a large and prosperous colony. So that 1732 year was the same year as it happens that George Washington was born. So Independence Hall is just a nickname we use for this building that didn't really come into use until well into the 1800s. So to talk about and understand the things that happened here, and that we'll need to talk a little bit about the lead-in to the really important events in the room we'll go into that's pictured there, and they include the approval and signing of three really important documents in that assembly room: the Declaration of Independence, what's the next one? Constitution of the United States, and there's one other, less perhaps thought about, Articles of Confederation, right, which took, loosely held together the states during, in the early years. But to go back to understand how these colonists, who were really proud colonists in the English Empire, who thought of themselves as Englishmen, to understand how they got to that point of rebelling against their parent country, it's helpful to go back to an earlier war, which we call the French and Indian War, but it's also called the 7 Years' War. And that war concluded, it was between England and France, and it was for control of territory and trade routes to the west of here, towards the Ohio Valley. George Washington fought as a colonel on the British side in that war, and he was on the winning side. The British won and effectively drove France out of colonial North America. So that was great for Britain, and there was no thought. It was concluded in 1763, and so that's 13 years before the Declaration of Independence. And if you had asked anybody in the colonies at that time whether there was any thought that we would become independent from Great Britain, it would have been a shocking idea. But certain things happened in the aftermath of that war, and they began to happen reasonably quickly. In a couple years, George III was looking around. It was a costly war, and he also wanted to put in place security measures, station British troops kind of on the western, what was there, the western frontier. And it was for security, but it was also partly to prevent a rush of colonists out into the western areas that would cause conflict with the Native Americans out there. But there were a lot of people out here who really wanted to move west. But anyway, so in addition to just stationing those troops out there, George III decided that, well, this was security in the colonies, and the colonies should help pay for it. So then we had the passage of the infamous Stamp Act, which happened actually a couple of years after the conclusion of that war. Well, this was the first direct tax imposed by Parliament on the colonists. And this was not something they were accustomed to. They were accustomed to being taxed by their colonial assemblies, and they thought of themselves as Englishmen with rights. And among those rights, and these were rights that Englishmen had fought for over centuries, and among one of the things that they fought for was no taxation without representation. Now here was the distant Parliament imposing a tax on these colonists, first direct tax that they'd imposed. And it provoked a very strong reaction, as you probably have learned. And it included petitions to the king. It included resistance to the customs collectors. It even included sending a petition to the British people, this and other measures, seeking their support. Surely they would view the colonists as Englishmen with full rights and would offer them some support, which of course did not happen. Petitions to the king weren't responded to. And one thing that was somewhat effective was a boycott of British goods. And that did get the Stamp Act repealed, but then there were others following in its wake, because Parliament and George III were never going to agree that the colonies were not subject to parliamentary control. So it set off just a cascading series of conflicts that ended with shots being, well, that culminated at a point in shots being fired at Lexington and Concord. So here was the conflict. Here in Pennsylvania already, over time, the representatives from the various colonies were coming into Philadelphia and meeting and trying to figure out responses to these various British measures, which they thought were putting them under duress and undermining their position as full Englishmen. British didn't see it that way, and we'll talk about the result when we go into Independence Hall. So while we're here, just jumping ahead in time, just want to call your attention to this picture here. Anybody know which event this picture might be depicting? Signing of something. Which thing? Which thing? Okay. So it's not the Declaration. And how you know this is that George Washington is right in the center as the chair of this meeting, whatever it is. And George Washington was the chair of the Constitutional Convention. So this is depicting the signing of the Constitution. So where's everybody coming here from?
California.
California.
Texas.
Texas.
DR.
DR?
No, DR, Dominican Republic.
Oh, DR, Dominican Republic. Okay.
Austria.
Yeah. Had to think about that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Austria.
South Africa.
South Africa.
Australia.
Australia. All right.
Maryland.
Maryland. All right. So we've
Great
got
state of Indiana.
the great state of Indiana. Stanford High School.
How long
And
did it
find out what
take
they
to
did.
construct this building?
Oh, it's decades.
Decades?
Yeah. And a lot of it had to do with finances. Okay, so let's start heading out slowly. And if you have anything, any trash, you can deposit it in this waste basket right here. all three branches of colonial government were located here. Which branch do you think is located in this building? Yep, judicial branch here. The legislative branch, sorry, in the room across the hall, in the assembly room. And then upstairs was the executive branch where, it's the Penn family running this colony. So you see, up here, judges would have sat up front, one or more judges in the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, depending on the nature of the case. Lawyers for both sides would have sat down here. Witness stand. And here we have a jury box. So we're starting to illustrate some of the features of British law that were valued by the colonists. So there was trial by jury, okay? Up front, these big jury boxes were for a grand jury, which would have weighed evidence to determine which of their fellow colonists might have been charged with a crime. So where you're standing, people could have come at the gallery, people could have come if they wanted to, and kind of like we watch on TV now, they could have, if they had the time and inclination, come to see which of their fellow colonists, their neighbors, was charged with a crime. If, they had the time and inclination, they could have listened to the juicy details. And you see behind you, there are arches, right? So it was very open. If there were a big crowd, they could spill out into the hallway. But this also illustrates a feature of the British law, that it was an open trial, it was public, and therefore there was accountability. Then, where I'm standing, who do you think stood here during the course of the trial? Right, the accused. So, literally standing trial. We still call it standing trial, even though we allow people to sit down. Okay, now as I stand here, do I look guilty or innocent? I look guilty. But another feature of the legal system was that the accused was considered innocent until proven guilty. So these were not the things that the colonists were rebelling against. In fact, they valued the rights that these reflect. They valued the legal system, and in fact, our current legal system is built on the British system. This was not the problem, but under some of the measures that were passed by Parliament during this period between the French and Indian War and independence, were also an erosion of some of these rights, or what the colonists saw as an erosion of these rights. If not without total reason, certain violators under the Stamp Act and other measures that were passed could be tried in vice admiralty courts. And one of the reasons for that was that they were having a hard time, Britain was having a hard time convicting any smugglers. But nonetheless, still, people were entitled to an open trial, but under the Stamp Act and some other measures, they could be tried in the vice admiralty courts, and they could be tried in an area, in a location distant from where they came from. In the vice admiralty court, they were tried by a judge, not a jury, and they were presumed